I love this spooky time of year. There's just an awesome vibe that comes with things like haunted houses, corn mazes, Halloween parties, and arguably best of all, watching scary movies. As a particular fan of horror films when they're done well, I'm extra happy at this time of year when I have an excuse to watch as many as possible. I also like this season for the simple joy of getting to make my Halloween special for all of you fine folks. However, while I didn't have much trouble figuring out what to talk about for the past 2 Halloweens, I was clueless as to the topic for this year. I puzzled and puzzed until— wait, wrong holiday, sorry. I thought hard about it for quite a while, but then it hit me on one Sunday late in September. We were spending some time over at my in-laws' house scanning Netflix for a movie to watch. With the Halloween season fast approaching, we decided to go with something spooky. That led us to watching Monster House. I hadn't seen it since first viewing it in the theater 15 years ago, so I thought, why not? While this isn't a great movie in my opinion, sitting there made me feel like Patrick when he saw the red balloon. I know what I want to do with my Halloween special. To be more specific, I thought, there should be more animated horror movies. When I say that, I literally mean animated horror movies. After all, there's plenty of family entertainment out there, live action or animated, that just happens to be macabre. There are also many animated films which incorporate elements of horror. Some of these films do it for more humorous reasons, such as how Wallace and Gromit, The Curse of the Were-Rabbit, lovingly spoofs classic monster movies. But then stop-motion animated films that Tim Burton has been involved with over the years are basically 2 steps away from being horror movies, with The Nightmare Before Christmas, Corpse Bride, and Frankenweenie all harboring a vibe that fits right in with the Halloween season. He also served as a producer for 9, which is an unsettling, violent, and bleak post-apocalyptic steampunk animation. 24 Frames of Nick just posted a pretty fun video about it if you're intrigued about that one. While some of these films are great, they don't take the plunge and completely commit themselves to being horror movies. But why should I really care so deeply if these movies do or don't? Besides, aren't many of these movies geared towards kids and would be traumatized by terrifying imagery if it was featured prominently? Yes, those things are true, and that's not exactly what I'm arguing here. Let children enjoy something relatively spooky around Halloween, or any time of the year really, just be cognizant of what you do show them. The point I do wish to get at, though, is that horror is a genre whose potential is largely untapped as far as animation is concerned. Now, I love live-action horror films as much as the next guy. They're similar to comedies for me in that I don't really like the majority of them, but when one is truly great, it stands out to me a lot more. Unlike comedies though, where I often can't put my finger down on what makes me laugh, there's a simpler reason for why horror movies have a tougher time working on me, and it's all summarized in one word: dissociation. Normally, this word is used in the context of describing mental illness, in which someone may be diagnosed with a disorder that relates to separating reality from fiction. But in this case, I'm framing this word in the perspective of immersion that a film creates. The best kind of horror in the live-action medium is when a story depicts something terrifying, but also isn't that detached from reality, like Psycho. This way, an audience can experience fear from a tangible, true source that could actually occur in real life. But when you start to factor in any type of fictional threat, suddenly it becomes tougher to scare the audience since they'll become more keenly aware of something fake. The tough job that filmmakers face in these circumstances is to conjure up threats that are tactile and scary, even when they're just smoke and mirrors. Animation, however, doesn't innately have that problem. Why, you might ask? It all stems from the fact that when you watch an animated film, you've already detached yourself from the notion that you're watching something real. With live action, you have to convince your audience to be scared by a special effect that, if done poorly, will look obviously different from everything else in the frame. It sticks out from the real-life actors and settings, causing you to be dejected from what the filmmakers intended you to feel. With animation, every single image you see has been fabricated by artists, regardless if the work was done by hand or on computers. Under these circumstances, the filmmakers aren't limited by what does or doesn't exist in real life. In the realm of make-believe, anything goes. A human being can exist in the same exact art style and setting as a fictional creature, creating this paradox where the audience is still keenly aware that what they're watching isn't real, but at the same time, it's easier to immerse the audience in something fantastical since reality and fantasy collide much more seamlessly this way. Additionally, artists are able to let their imaginations run free when they're creating a world exaggerated separated and separate from our own. Something that exists in their movie may not make a lot of logical sense, but a wholly original universe allows for unique ideas and characters to flourish in all their brilliantly artistic glory. But in being more specific to the topic at hand, the nature of animation enables boundless creativity for some truly messed up stuff to get put into films and TV shows, and yet not have it clash with more of the basic elements. Let's take a look at a few quick examples of horror movies that benefit from being animated. I already mentioned Monster House earlier, but I mean, there's a reason why it inspired the very video you're watching. The titular house in question is enlivened so effectively by the fact that the film is animated. You could try to make the setting work in live action, but depending on the time period it gets made, you either end up with an elaborate prop animated with a bunch of stop motion and animatronics, or you just have a computer-generated image that gets superimposed onto a green screen background. Either one of those options could easily break audience immersion with dated effects or poorly implemented CGI, but not so with animation. Yeah, the human character designs may not hold up compared to modern standards, but the house is a terrific monster. The way it was personified by the animators allows it to be a legitimately menacing threat, and more importantly, one that people of the appropriate demographic can be scared of. But then you pivot over to some of the films that Laika has made. Their debut film Coraline is an absolute prime example of how to make a dark fantasy tale work for kids. The chief reason behind this is the animation style, which deliberately uses very angular and depressive features on the characters to emphasize what their personalities are all about. There's a rich level of detail present in both the real world and the alternate reality conjured up by the other mother, so much so that it becomes very clear why the titular protagonist is so enticed by the bright, colorful, and mystical fantasy compared to the drab grays of her late winter Oregon environment. For much of its runtime, the film is slowly building up the tension until it finally releases as Coraline discovers the true nature of the other mother's sinister universe. Suitably, the creature and world designs become more threatening as the stakes are raised, and the effective manner in which these images contrast with earlier scenes really emphasizes how scary it would be for a child to go through something like this. And then their next film, Paranorman, is a much more overt horror joint, even when it may also be a comedy. It combines a lot of different elements together, including but not limited to zombies, witchcraft, and a kid who's a spiritual medium similar to Cole from The Sixth Sense. Again though, the exaggerated and striking detail present in the animation allowed these macabre elements to mesh well with the average suburban setting. If this exact script was produced and performed in live action yet pieced together by the same storyboards, you'd probably get a fun movie with a worthwhile story, but some of the delivery would be lost on world and creature design that quite starkly contrasts with what's real. The animation, then, allows for the absence of light and emphasis on different colors to establish a strong mood, while the crazy events in the story don't get muddled out by dated effects. I haven't seen this movie since watching it in a theater in 2012, but I still distinctly remember images that are both frightening and hilarious due to how well they were planned out by the animators. That's an effect most movies don't leave with their audiences years later. Yet despite the quality of those movies, the one that I keep coming back to as a golden standard for how much animation can elevate a script is the late Satoshi Kon's Perfect Blue. Unlike the previous movies I've mentioned, this dark anime classic is strictly for adults. I wouldn't even recommend this to older teenagers. The very mature and often violent content present in this story is a little bit too much for younger audiences to see, in my opinion. But beyond that, Perfect Blue is the only animated movie I've mentioned in this video that I could perceive working just fine as a live-action production. It's much more akin to a psychological thriller than traditional horror, to the point that many have accused Darren Aronofsky of ripping off plot beats from Perfect Blue when he made Black Swan. Still, even if a talented team did produce a quality live-action remake, there are certain qualities of the medium of animation that make me prefer how this film was made. I can't say many of them without directly spoiling the plot, but a lot of that boils down to many quote-unquote triggering things that happen in the story. Some truly messed up stuff occurs here, and if that was to be simulated by actors and practical effects, it'd take a lot of care and effort to make sure such plot points don't get misinterpreted as insensitive exploitation. Not that animation should be used as an excuse to irresponsibly show off disturbing images, but Satoshi Kon seemed to understand that when you have characters that are created by sequenced ink and pencil drawings, you do have greater flexibility in how you can express your ideas, especially since this story frequently straddles the line between reality and fiction. And that's exactly the case here. Perfect Blue is very violent, frightening, disturbing, or whatever similar adjective you want to throw at it, but its imagery effectively serves the story. For all those reasons and more, I'd hope that animation can continue to grow, not just as a vessel for more horror stories to be told. Hollywood, like many other established institutions of business, follows the money. As far as animation goes, every studio wants to chase after the next Frozen or Despicable Me, since those are the movies families flock to see. Many people I know wouldn't dream of taking their kids to see something spooky like Paranorman, let alone watch a film like Perfect Blue when the kids are asleep. And that's fine. I'm not trying to shame anyone for their taste in film. I personally just love animation so much that I don't want it to be restricted to money-grubbing cash grabs that thrive on threadbare scripts and incessant fart jokes. If you're like me and wish to get more from animation, especially when something unique like an animated horror movie comes along, go support it. After all, it's ultimately our choice if we want movies like this. If we support them, people will make them. And that's it for this year's Halloween special. I appreciate you taking this brief amount of time to hear me talk about a topic I deeply care about. If you liked what you saw and would be interested to see more, feel free to subscribe to the channel and join the notification squadron so that you don't miss out on my future videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a safe and happy Halloween.